Hi, that's yeah, I'm looking terrible this morning. Hi to everyone. I'm Mia Griffith, and my son is actually asleep, so I'm doing it while he's asleep. And I got my camera fixed. It was not turned on into settings. Didn't know that. First time. Okay, let's see. This chapter 2. We did chapter 1. So let's do no chapter 2. Chapter 2. Come on. Thing. The sky hung low, heavy with unspent rain, pressing down on the boats at the between the memory of a flickering clock and something else he couldn't quite name. A feeling more than a thought. Now he stood on the dock beside the traveler, his burned hands buried deep in the pocket of his worn jacket, watching the crew move around him. The boat's name, Marlena, was painted along the hull in faded white letters. Years of salt and weather had worn it down, like everything else out here. The metal sides were marked with scratches and dents, stories no one bothered telling anymore. 2 weeks out, that was the plan. They would head west into deeper waters, far beyond the crowded fishing lanes, where the shoals run thick this time of year. Hake, Yellowtail, good morning. If the net, yeah, sorry, I'm still trying to wake up. good, good money if the nets come back full. If Devan, he turned at the call. Peter stood near the loading ramp, waving him over. A cigarette hung from the corner of his mouth, smoke curly, lazy, into the cold air. His overalls were already stained with grease like he'd been up for hours. Come give me a hand before I break my back alone, Peter shouted. You complain even if you weren't, Diva muttered as he walked over. Peter grinned. That's because I still be working. Crates lined the dock, bait supplied, and spare gear, the smell of frozen fish and diesel mixed into something sharp and familiar. They started, loading without much talk. Lift, carry, sit down. The rhythm came naturally. Ruan was already on deck, moving too fast, too eager. He nearly slipped while dragging the crate across the wet surface, catching himself at the last second. Careful, Ivan called. Ruan nodded quietly. Yeah, I got it. But his hand didn't look steady. First long trip this far out, Ivan thought. He remembered that feeling, the excitement, the cold edge beneath it. George stood near the net, checking the lines. His large hands moved with surprising precision as he ran them through his fingers, feeling for weak points. You trust those knots? Divan asked as he approached. George didn't look up. I trust mine. Good. George paused and glanced at him. Did you hear the wind last night? He asked. Divan shook his head. Not really. George frowned slightly. Sounded wrong. If you take your, if you listen, sometimes even weird corners can make wind sound scary and tense, making everything feel tense, and that's what I was going for. It sounded tense and wrong, as the feeling that they shouldn't go. That's what I was going for. Divan didn't respond. George turned back to the nets From the wheelhouse above, Jonas watched everything. Jonas is the captain. He held the same posture as always, arms resting on the railing, eyes moving from man to man, details to detail. Nothing slipped past him. Not yet. Devan climbed up to join him. You're letting them do all the work? Devan said. With it's more like a joke. Devan was joking. Jonas didn't look at him. I'm supervising. Of course. They stood side by side, looking out over the harbor. Other boats were preparing to leave. Engine caught to life. Men shouted across the water. Gulls circling overhead, crying out in sharp, broken bursts. Everything is normal. Everything is as it should be. "You're ready?" Jonas asked. Divan didn't answer immediately. His gaze drifted the water between the boats. It looked darker than it should. Still, too still. That Divan added the feeling of something is not right. "Divan!" He blinked and looked back at Jonas. "Yeah?" he said. "I'm ready." Jonas touched him a second longer than usual, then nodded. "Good." Below, Peter shouted, "The engine's good. It's shoe hold, and there's a breaker. That's your job," Jonas called back. Peter laughed. The last of the supplies come aboard. Fuel checked, nets secured, food packed, enough for 2 weeks if they stretch it. Water tanks is full, everything is place, everything routine. But routine didn't mean safe. The water is never safe, the sea. It's always dangerous. Tivan knew that better than most. They cast off just after noon. Ropes were pulled in, the engine rumbled to life beneath their feet. A deep, steady vibration that ran through the ship's bones. The harbour slowly began to fall away behind them. Docks, buildings, noise, all shrinking. Ruan stood at the stern, watching the land disappear. I think that's a scary way. I never been on a boat. I I was on a kayak and a rowboat on a river, but but never on a big boat going out in the sea. I think I would not make it. I'm too afraid. Um, the rowboat we were on a kayak. I did kayak for school. Was on a river at our school, and we had this. Our school was more like a private school with PCs and stuff. Not a fancy school. I'm not rich. My mother is not rich. I'm actually poor. So yeah, it was academic school. We had horses at the school. We could go on the river at the school. Uh, I always there was some big chessboard that the guy that uh, started the school built and could play chess. It was really an awesome school, really. But we work hard. We did work really hard. Where was it? Ruins. Okay, you get used to it. He asked as Stephen stepped beside him. To what? Leaving. Stephen looked out in the ocean. No, he said. Run front. Then why do it? Stephen didn't answer. There wasn't a simple one. The sea opened around them, wide, endless, and dark. Grey water beneath a grey sky. The kind of day where the horizon blurred, where you couldn't tell where the sea ended and the sky began. By late afternoon, the coastline was gone. Nothing but water in every direction. The first sight came quietly. So quietly that only Divan noticed it. He stood near the rail, watching the water slide past the hull. Something shifted below. It was not a wave, nor a reflection. Something deeper. He leaned forward slightly. The surface remained smooth, but beneath it there was movement. Slow, massive. See something? George asked from behind him. Devan straightened. No? George stepped closer, peering over the side. Thought I saw, he began, then stopped. What? Devan asked. George shook his head. Nothing. But it didn't sound convincing. The engine hummed steadily, the boat pressed forward, and what had been beneath them was gone. Evening come faster than it should have. Cloud thickened, the light faded early, shadowed by a sky that seemed too heavy to hold it. The wind picked up, not strong, but colder, sharper. They ate mostly in silence, bread with tinned meat, coffee that tasted like rust. Ruan tried to start a conversation, but it died quickly. Even Peter was quieter than usual. You feel that? Peter said something. Everyone looked at him. Feel what? Jonas asked. Peter frowned, tapping slightly against the table. That vibration! They all went still, listening. There it was, faint, deep. It did not come from the engine, something else. It ran through the hall like a distant echo, low, almost rhythmic. Then it stopped, just like that. Probably nothing, Peter said quietly. Old metal? No one argued, but no one believed it either. Night fell fully, darker than the night before. No stars, no moon, just black. Devan stood alone on deck. The wind struck at his jacket. The sea stretched out around him, invisible, except for the faint churn alongside the hull. He listened. At first, nothing. Then, very faint, so faint he almost thought it was in his head, a sound. It's not the wind or the water, something else. It came again, longer this time, almost like a voice carried from impossible far away. Divan's body went still. He leaned slightly over the rails, trying to hear it again. The sound returned without words. Not in any language he knew, but close enough to make something deep in his chest tighten. Behind him, the boat creaked softly. The crew moved somewhere below. Normal sounds, safe sounds. But out there, in the dark, something was calling, and it wasn't the sea. Devon stepped back from the railing slowly and deliberately. He didn't take his eyes off the water, because whatever was out there, he had a distant feeling. It already knew he was listening. Okay, that was the last entry of chapter 2. Um, yes, sorry about my struggling to talk and stuff like that, but I really did just wake up and I need to do it before my son uh, starts to wake up. Then, he has autism, so he just will need to help him with that. Need to help him with that. And yes, okay, so thank you for listening, or if you listen after the time. Thank you for listening. And if you can, maybe like it and subscribe. And if you love horrors and sci-fi and stuff like that, I wrote for 27 years, so I have a lot of stories. I can show you papers and papers. Damn, that one story of mine actually at the two papers I typewritten for, actually that time. I typewritten. They had the two first papers, first two chapters. Then chapter 2, 3, 4, and 5 is destroyed of water damage. So yes, I didn't have water. damage on them, and now I need to figure out what was my idea on that story. But maybe I'll get it. Thank you so much, and goodbye.